Cool. We have a pretty cool guest, so I guess we should start, but maybe we shouldn't. But I guess we should. Um, and I would like to start by telling you a little bit about my co-host. Milka is from Northern Virginia. She is a rising grad student. Something about her, painting was her new quarantine hobby. As you can see, pretty talented, pretty great. And she played volleyball in high school, which I didn't know. That's exciting. What position did you play?
I played outside hitter.
Okay.
So on the front left.
I'm proud of you. I see that. That's crazy. Good for you. Let's keep going.
Did you play sports in high school?
No. No, I didn't.
Joined volleyball.
I actually, some fun fact, I played chess. So that's kind of like, you should go.
Well, as you guys can see, this is my wonderful co-host and colleague, Carroll. He's a DC native. He's a poet, a teacher, a host. And something you all probably didn't know is that he hated lasagna as a kid. So all my lasagna haters, you found a new a buddy, and my lasagna supporters, you found a new enemy. So we'll try to get him to our side. But he also believes that ginger goes with everything. I don't know how I feel about that last one, Kenny.
Listen to me. Ginger? whatever you're about to name, whatever food, whatever drink, ginger goes with it. And that's on period. Like, obviously we're here for a conversation. This isn't a conversation. That's just a fact. Milka, name something. Name anything.
I think mayo is kind of one of those condiments that goes on everything. I mean, I may be alone in this, but milk, I see milk. Yeah, no, I don't like ginger though.
Let me tell y'all about this. Let me get y'all hip to something. We're not sponsored by them, but at Trader Joe's, there's a cereal that has ginger and clusters in the cereal. You drink that with almond milk. It's fire. That's fire. You could use whatever milk you want, but that's how I do it.
But if Trader Joe's is listening and would like to sponsor us, we're open.
Hey, if Trader Joe's is listening and would like to sponsor Joe, we're here. Somebody talk to Joe. I think mayo is a bad choice. I don't think it goes on everything. I think.
See, you all came here to hear a poet, and you learned that ginger clusters exist at Trader Joe's. And I think that is a great segue into talking about what we have in store for tonight. So tonight, for logistics, we will be bringing on the wonderful Clint Smith. We'll start off with poetry questions, and he'll read us his poetry, followed by, as Joseph said, an advertisement featuring his new book and other things going on with LMSVoice. And then we'll follow up with some cool culture questions, kind of get to know more about Clint, and kind of have some, which is our favorite section, the hot seat section. So chop it up with us. I think this is going to be a great show. And as you can see that we do have closed captioning, and if you need to adjust any of the settings, you can go through settings on Zoom and enlarge it if needed. So with that.
Do I have, yeah, wait. It's been a long, shout out to being a long week. I think we kind of hit everything. I also just want to say again, if you are interested, all the after series or LMS chats we do is based off of the curriculum at LMSVoice.com. So if after this is your first time hearing the poem, you're like, wow, I wish I could do a workshop like this with my students. You should go there. Go there. It's there. It exists already. Great for students, great for anybody. Shout out to just getting with your friends and doing workshops. Where is that at? We're not doing it enough.
And it's free, like Joseph said.
It's the free for me. But again, if you want to sponsor us, we don't work for free, so please pay us. I think we're ready to start. Yeah. Do you want to tell? Yeah.
So our wonderful guest, Clint Smith, is a staff writer at The Atlantic. He is the author of Counting Descent, which won the 2017 Literary Award for Best Poetry Book from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, and was a finalist for an NAACP Image Award. Clint has received fellowships from New America, the Art for Justice Fund, KCAM, and the National Science Foundation. His writing has been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times Magazine, Poetry Magazine, The Paris Review, and elsewhere.
He currently teaches writing and literature at the DC Central Detention Facility. His debut nonfiction book, How the Word is Passed, which explores how different historical sites reckon with or fail to reckon with the relationship to the history of slavery, was published in June by Little Brown, and it went #1. Okay, so you can go get it after this. We're gonna plug it more. Okay, I'm gonna finish the bio. And he received his BA in English from Davidson College and his PhD in education from Harvard University. Virtual people, please help me give a warm welcome to our guest for tonight, Clint Smith.
We will be linking his poem so you all can follow along as Clint speaks.
What's going on, everybody? Oh, I see so many of my teacher homies out here. Oh, look at all these faces. It's so good to see you all. And thank you all for having me. It's the LMSVoice crew. It's so good to be here. Teachers are you all know this, if y'all follow, teachers are my favorite group of people. So I appreciate y'all. And I know some folks have kids. It's a miracle. This is also when I give my qualifier that if my 4-year-old and 2-year-old come stumbling in here, it's because my 4-year-old especially knows that I used to lock the door and then he would just start banging on it. And so I leave it unlocked because it feels like a more elegant solution. But now he just comes in and tries to tell people knock jokes. So that could happen. We'll see. We're in that period where he gets up from bed like 5 times. I want water. I need to pee. I want more water. There's a elephant in my room. Whatever, all sorts of stuff. But I'm so glad to be here.
Word. If you'd like, Quint, you can get straight into the poem, and that way we can just start up the question.
Word. I am going to be reading from my poem, When People Say We Have Made It Through Worse Before. When people say we have made it through worse before, all I hear is the wind slapping against the gravestones of those who did not make it, those who did not survive to see the confetti fall from the sky, those who did not live to watch the parade roll down the street. I've grown accustomed to a lifetime of aphorisms meant to assuage my fears, pithy sayings meant to convey that everything ends up fine in the end. But there is no solace in rearranging language to make a different word tell the same lie. Sometimes the moral arc of the universe does not bend in a direction that will comfort us. Sometimes it bends in ways we don't expect, and there are people who fall off in the process. Please, dear reader, do not say that I am hopeless. I believe there is a better future to fight for. I simply accept the possibility that I may not live to see it. I've grown weary of telling myself lies that I might one day begin to believe. We are not all left standing after the war has ended. Some of us have become ghosts by the time the dust has settled.
Give it up for the poet. Obviously, we don't have a ruckus, but I think I see everybody clapping who I can't see. What's up?
Amazing.
Also, I think we want the knock jokes. I'm low-key in favor of, knock jokes.
The 4-year-old right now is in this. So we read knock jokes during dinner time and stuff. And so, there's the knock joke that goes, knock, who's there? Banana, banana who? Knock, who's there? Banana, banana who? Knock, who's there? Banana, banana who? Orange, orange who? Orange, you're glad I didn't say banana? And he falls over every time. But he in a very adorable way misunderstands the conceit of the joke. And so he's like, knock, who's there? Water bottle who? Knock, who's there? Water bottle who? Knock, who's there? Remote who? Aren't you glad I didn't say water bottle? And then he just falls on the floor. He thinks it's so funny because that's how he understands. He doesn't understand orange as being the pun yet. So that's where we're at now. It's just looking at random items around the house and repeating them and then saying the other. It's very funny.
great. I'm glad we all had that same knock knock joke that
It's a classic.
I felt like that knock knock joke held a power that I was not familiar with, where it's just anywhere you go. And it's funny, I think my period was like, I would say banana 12 times. And I thought it was so funny.
Just keep going.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
I still wait at the edge of my seat wondering what's going to be at the end of this knock knock joke. That's how nostalgic it is.
It's still like, what will I really hear orange, or is this time
Right.
not the time? Okay. Knock knock jokes aside, even though I feel like audience probably just wants to hear more knock knock joke stuff, but I guess we'll talk about this poem, this amazing poem. That again we have in the chat. We're probably going to paste it again if you would like to like read along while we're asking Clint questions about it. But I feel like a good place to start, that we start with a lot of our writers, is like, what provoked you to write this poem, or where did this poem begin?
Yeah.
If you can remember that.
I think so this poem was published in 2019, and we were living, as many people will remember, through a political era in which we were experiencing, it felt like a daily onslaught of existential threats to various groups of people, whether it was some groups of people on the verge of being deported or actually deported, whether it was some groups of people being not allowed into the country, whether it was, I mean, the list goes on and on, whether it was some people, whether or not they would like have the food they need to eat, or healthcare, or a whole host of things. And I think that like many people, I was very familiar with the saying that these ideas like, we'll get through this, it'll all end up fine, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice, we'll make it through this, we'll get through this. And specifically, I started to really wonder about the we, right? And like to interrogate the idea of the we, and that pronoun, and like what sort of work it was doing, and like who is the we that we are talking about when such a statement is made. Because it's always been clear, but I think it became more acutely clear that not everyone was going to make it to whatever was at the end of this, if there was an end of this, or whatever iteration of this period of time we were living through. And so part of it, so many of my poems are often a way of like holding me accountable to, and sort of like wrestling with ethical inconsistencies I see manifesting in my own life. And that's one of the things I love about poetry, is that it allows you to sort of just wrestle with questions and ideas and concepts without having to come up with an answer at the end, right? You could just wrestle with a question and then have more questions at the end. And I recognized that like I was someone who has used that sort of we language in a variety of different contexts, right? We don't talk enough about this, or we should do this, or we will do this, or we won't, and I'm like, it's so imprecise. Because if I say we don't talk enough about this, clearly there are people talking about it. Maybe I just wasn't talking about it. So why am I trying to extrapolate or impute sort of something that I am just now coming to be aware of, or something that I'm realizing that I don't talk or think enough about, onto a larger amount of people? And so I think part of what I've been, and I think the book that I've been writing over the last few years has taught me this as well, is just trying to be as precise and nuanced as possible. And that that sometimes we can use language that is meant to elicit like a visceral emotional response, but that is also inaccurate. And I didn't want to be someone using inaccurate, imprecise language, even when it was in good faith, and even if I had good intentions. And so in many ways, I am the audience of that poem. I'm the first audience of that poem, because I was writing it attempting to remind myself not to fall into the trap of saying it's going to be okay. because there are a lot of people in all sorts of global, social, economic, political contexts for whom it will not be okay. And I think the poem had a sort of resurgence during the era of COVID, for I think obvious reasons. And because I think there were a lot of people who were saying like, we'll get through this. When we get to the end of this, it'll be okay. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Millions of people lost people they love. Millions of people have died across the world. So yeah, I think I could not have anticipated the extent to which it would resonate with people across so many different contexts. But I'm grateful and thankful that it has.
You know, I want to follow up on this point, you know, like recognizing that so many people were so affected by this, and how many times people have been losing their lives, and you know, like lines throughout the poem where you say things like, you know, I have grown accustomed to a lifetime of aphorisms meant to assuage my fears, and some of us have become ghosts by the time the dust is settled. You know, it seems like you're kind of harping on survivor's guilt. I wanted to know, was that intentional? Was that an accurate interpretation of kind of what this poem could be meaning?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly part of it. I mean, I think the survivor's guilt is almost less about the surviving itself than the almost erasure of those who did not survive themselves, right? So it's in the sense that it's like the feelings that I'm sort of wrestling with throughout the poem are not centered on I have lived and I feel bad about having lived. The feeling, the ethical conundrum is that I may have lived through whatever thing, whatever period, whatever phenomenon. And in the saying we made it, I was not acknowledging or considering or thinking about the people who did not. So I guess that's an iteration of survivor's guilt. But I wanted to make the distinction between like the feeling of being guilty for having survived and then the feeling of feeling guilty for having not acknowledged those who did not.
And you keep mentioning it, like specifically the idea of the we. And I thought, and I'm glad you said that too, because I think when I was reading it, like it felt like the we carried a lot of weight in the poem. Like towards the end. Well, to start, you said something similar to what you just said on Twitter. You said, when people say things like we have made it through worse before, I'm always curious about who the we is. But in the last stanza of the poem, when you start the line with like, we are not all left standing, it feels almost like you're replacing maybe some of the like quotes you heard before, right, with like this idea of like, we are not all left standing, and that's who the we is. So my question is like, I'm curious, did you purposely frame it like that? And when you said, when you have the we and the end like that, who is the we in the last stanza of the poem?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And I think that part of what I wanted to do was like play with and allude to, in a sort of irony, like the very thing that was the catalyst of the poem itself, right? And so to take the sort of nomenclature and phraseology of like, we'll make it through, we'll be okay, we'll be all right in the end, and then use that, but sort of shift the framework, but use the same sort of like pattern of language to say, we won't. And to sort of purposefully, and again, ironically, like leave the we ambiguous and unclear in the way that it is often ambiguous and unclear when we use it, even with good intention.
Right. And I would love to, jumping back up to the beginning of the poem, like when we talk about like what you're replacing that line with. So you have the line, sometimes the moral arc of the universe does not bend in a direction that will comfort us. sometimes it bends in ways we don't expect, and there are people who fall off in the process. And this line, I believe, plays off the Martin Luther King quote, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And I'm curious, like, why did you decide to reference this quote in the poem?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, it's so popular, and so sort of decontextualized from the larger aggregate political ethos of King's life. And so, like, part of the thing about King, and I think we're in a period now where more people have a more robust and sophisticated understanding of the totality of what King stood for, right? Of his sort of economic platform, of his social platform, of his global platform, that he was somebody who was against imperialism, that he was someone who was against militarism, that he was someone who believed in universal basic income, that he was someone who believed in universal job guarantees, that he was someone who named explicitly said that the United States government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the history of the world. Like, this is, and so what happens is that, as we know, the more sanitized versions of King's work are sort of pulled from certain speeches and decontextualized and used to make arguments that are not necessarily consistent with the full scope of, like, the arguments that he was making. And so for me, I wanted to take that line and sort of play with the abstract and the sort of, like, the metaphorical and the physical, right? Like, I like, one of the people who do that best is, I think one of everybody else's favorite poets, Hanif Abdurraqib, who does this sort of, like, everything, you read a line and he does this, like, wonderful play between, like, the metaphor, like, if he says something about the moon, he will talk about the moon in the same line as both metaphor and literal. And we'll do it with, like, everything, right? Like, Hanif is so good. It's, like, absurd how good of a writer Hanif is. Like, sometimes I read Hanif's work and I'm like, this doesn't make sense that this came from, like, a real human's brain. Like, it's bananas. He's so talented. And one of the things that I love, and I think that I've been influenced by in his work, is playing with the metaphorical and literal in a contained space. And so, when I say sometimes the moral arc of the universe does not bend in the direction that will comfort us. Sometimes it bends in ways we don't expect. And there are people who fall off in the process. That is very much influenced by that sort of literary sensibility in trying to take a very common metaphor and then also render it three-dimensional. And so that was the sort of literary impetus. And I think, like, just taking the line, as you said before, of King's work, that is one of the very clear allusions to Martin Luther King all of the time, and just problematizing it and complicating it, and, like, having us think about what, like, the very nature of, like, what the arc is and how it bends and if it bends, and just, again, like I said before, so much of what I like about poetry is just asking questions or presenting presenting with and wrestling with alternate possibilities and alternate interpretations that are not necessarily aligned with the sort of, like, commonly held conception of a line or a word or an idea.
No, that's real. And I think, oh, wait, Milka, were you about to say something?
Go ahead, Kenny.
Zoom is so, but I love that. And I think it's interesting that you're saying this, because I think even just the idea of, like, the literal and the physical, like, the literal line of, like, King's, or the references there, but also I think in a lot of ways the poem like, speaks to what you were talking about with King, and, like, how people use King versus, like, what it was like for King and like not only his legacy, but also like I think just the image of falling off is like, yeah, like so many people fell in like in King's work. Like that is the work, the kind of work he did. But I would love, we have time. I think
he fell. Yeah. Look at you. You bring in other, that's what I love about poetry workshops. I'm like, oh damn, King fell. That was always in my mind.
It was always on purpose.
It was always on purpose.
It was always
that's the thing. I mean, that's such a cool thing about, like, sometimes when I Skype with classes or Zoom with classes, people will say like, what does this line mean? And I'm like, it depends on the context, but sometimes I'm like, it almost doesn't matter what it meant to me. Like what's much more interesting about poetry and art generally is like what it means to you, right? Like that's so much more interesting. It's in some ways like thinking about how someone reads that line and they're like, dang, like that's an allusion to how like King himself fell off the moral arc. Like I wasn't thinking about that when I wrote the poem. I could lie and tell you that I was, but yeah, whole time. But that's so fast. It's the same way that when you have a group of people who look at a painting and like everybody sees something different in that painting. I love this Alfred Lord Tennyson line from his poem Ulysses. He says, "I am a part of all that I have met." And like, if there was like a thesis statement to my life, it would be that like, when I think about what animates how I move through the world and how I think we all move through the world, it is that we bring all of our identities, all of our experiences, all of our sensibilities, all of our ideologies to any person or piece of literature or piece of art that we encounter. And so that's one of the things that I've loved so much about seeing how this poem has moved through the world, are all the different ways when somebody will quote it and be like, this made me think of, you know, my mother who was like battling cancer, or this poem makes me think of how hard it is to get through high school, or this poem makes me, I mean, all sorts of stuff, right? And that's what it's about for me. That's what art's about. You put something out into the world and like, ultimately, I don't have any control over how it's received. And I don't really want that control. I want to create something that meant something to me and meant something specific to me. And then it might go out into the world and mean something completely different to someone else. And that's okay. And that's not even okay, that's like amazing. That's an amazing thing.
Milka, yeah.
Clint Smith, you're just wonderful. What do I say to this? I mean, this poem, hearing the context behind the poem and kind of the ways it's kind of inspired your thought processes on how to kind of re-envision things. And like, even you talking about, you really kind of care about what the reader thinks, not really what you thought you thought. And I feel very kind of like re-excited, kind of reignited, just because I'm having to look at these things and like, it's challenging the way I'm perceiving, like even just the concept of this poem. I mean, like you fearing or feeling guilty for feeling like you forgot people that didn't survive this horrific process. And even when you say, you know, please, dear reader, do not say I'm hopeless. Like I as a reader felt almost not called out, but almost like, please pay close attention to what I'm saying. And like, I wanted to know, really, we wanted to know kind of what made you decide to talk to the reader directly. Usually that holds a lot of significance. And then before we move on to the next section, I just didn't want that to go unnoticed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'll just say one more thing about the reader piece, but like, that's one thing that I think is so important when teaching poetry, because I think a lot of kids get caught up in like, I don't know what this poem means. Like, I don't know, you're like, because on your AP test, or I haven't taken an AP test in a long time. I didn't do very well on my AP test either. But it will be like, what did the reader mean? What did the poet mean when they said da 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 da? And it just is like, that's such an uninteresting question to me. Like, you can't be in the reader's head. Like, you can't be in the poet's head. What does it mean to you? And like, explain, like, a much more interesting essay is like, take this line and like talk about what you have pulled from it, and then like allow them to make their own connections. Because poetry shouldn't feel like shouldn't always feel like this puzzle that you have to like put together. Some poems can be a puzzle in like a fun way, but like, I think we lose young people and their interest in poetry when we tell them that they don't have a right to pull their own meaning from what the poem is. And I just think that that's so important. It's just so important. The Please Dear Reader piece, Ross Gay does that a lot in some of his work. And Ross Gay, another amazing poet, and just like amazing human. But he does this sort of like breaking the fourth wall of his in his poems. And I've never really done, this might be the only poem that I've ever done that in. I don't do it often, but it felt like both an opportunity to, again, because so many of these poems, and a poem like this especially, is like written to myself, right? So in some ways, when I say please dear reader, I'm like also talking to myself. I'm like, Clint, like, don't get it twisted. Like, this is not hopelessness. This is precision. This is acknowledgement. This is being accurate and being cognizant. And so it is a reminder to myself and to said reader that there is a difference and a distinction between a sort of like hopelessness, because I think someone could maybe read this poem, and maybe it's also like an effort of like clarification, right? Like if you read to this point and you're like, dang, this man is pessimistic, or this man is, he don't like Dr. King, he don't like the we, he don't like he just, this is depressing. And it's like, no, this is not about hopelessness, or it's not about pessimism. This is about like us being true, us being real, us being accurate, us taking it's in conversation with the entire, we're having this national conversation to the extent that it can be called a conversation right now about like history and critical race theory and like how these things are taught in school. And in some ways, the same way that people are now attempting to prevent teachers from teaching the accuracy and truth of US history, is in and of itself an erasure of people who did not make it or did not experience the freedom, the promise, the upward mobility, the opportunity that America has predicated its sort of mission statement on. And it is important in both a macro and a micro context for us to directly acknowledge and confront the way that we have not accounted for the people who didn't make it, and some of whom like didn't make it very intentionally, because they were in a state sanctioned way, were prevented from experiencing freedom or experiencing life because they were killed. So yeah.
Word. Thank you, Clint. And again, we will have more questions for Clint. But before we do that, we'd like to give him a second, maybe get some water, do whatever he needs to do, and bring Joseph up to tell us a little bit about what's going on with LMSVoice.
All right. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Hi, everybody. This is going to be one of those very quick commercial breaks where we tell you a little bit about what's going on at LMSVoice, just in case you got here through some other means, then having discovered the amazing curriculum that we have on our website. Speaking of that incredible curriculum, let's take a look at the curriculum that's not on the screen. There it is. So if you go to LMSVoice.com, you can either hit the curriculum button, or you can go to LMSVoice.com/LMS-curriculum/ and then they'll ask you to enter your email address. And that's all we really want in exchange for this curriculum, a way to keep in touch with you and let you know about the amazing, wonderful things that are happening at LMSVoice. But in here, you will see this curated curriculum of over 100 pieces, lessons that will not only engage and challenge the young people that you work with, but they are good for people of any age, any writing level. And there is so much more to come. At LMSVoice, it is me and Brian Hannon. We have our hosts that come in and help, and then we partner with a bunch of folks who are right now out there creating new curriculum to be put on this webpage as soon as we can get to it. But this website is a labor of love. It is something that is free and will always be free. And so if you are out there and you want to participate or help, please go to the website, shoot us an email. And if there's something that we can do together, something you would like to contribute to this space and you don't mind making it free for the world, we can have a conversation about that. But this is here. Please share it with all of the people on the planet that you know. We want to get it out there. Don't give them your password, make them sign up themselves. And speaking of things that you should do yourself, how about go out and grab this book? This is where we also tell you, if you didn't know, that our amazing guest, the gentleman who has been talking on so many different programs and yet still has been here to bless us in our small little corner of the world with what has so far been a very insightful and a very wisdom-filled conversation. He has a book out. We want to keep it on that New York bestseller list, not just because we like to take care of like poets from back in the day that we know and love, but because this work is transformative. If I didn't know Clint, I would have already heard from about 20 people in my circle about this amazing new book that came out and how the work in this book is going to be one of those watershed moments in our society where we get to have this conversation in even more places, and is pushing the conversation forward. So if you don't have this book, please order it for your friends, order for your family, and support this amazing work that is now in the world. And with that, I am about to turn the show back over because we have 20 more minutes, 18 more minutes of conversation with Clint Smith. Please, our wonderful hosts are doing a great job. Please welcome them back to the stage, Milka and Kenny.
Thank you.
So much great content.
Yeah.
So much.
So much great content. Also, he wrote this book too. I would also get this book as well.
You can get both.
If you out buying books,
you get both.
You get both. You know, this is called Counting Descent. And I think we're gonna share stuff in the joint. He's a great writer. What's up, Clint? Welcome back. I think it's always funny too when you were talking about Hanif. You're like, oh my God, Hanif is so amazing. You just went #1. You're #1 New York Times bestseller. So,
also, you know, for people who want baby steps, they can start following him on Twitter and get a taste of Clint, a snapshot taste, and then find themselves buying 10 copies. But yeah, very, very, very awesome. Sorry, it was great content. You know, I get really easily pleasantly overwhelmed, and so I'm just ecstatic. This is my ecstatic phase.
Milka, honestly, I'm like a little bit calmed down, Milka. You're doing whoa, off the rails.
So we have now arrived to the second part of our conversation, which is the culture section, and we get to kind of know a little bit more of Clint outside of his poem, and kind of get a more holistic sense of who he is. So I think a fair question, Clint, for you to ask is, you know, who is Clint Smith, if you could describe it?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a question.
Here.
Who is Clint Smith? Clint Smith is a dad to 2 young, exuberant, opinionated, small children, a husband to an amazing woman, a son, a brother, and someone who just loves, I just love books. I love language. I love the way that books have transformed my understanding of who I am in relationship to the world. I think part of what animated this book, both counting this. I think part of, and I'm someone who tries to create the sort of things for the world that I would have wanted when I was younger. I think that animates a lot of my work. Counting Descent is very intentionally a poetry book that I wish I had been able to read in high school. When poetry felt very distant, when it felt very far away, when it felt very inaccessible. How the Word is Passed is a book that is attempting to fill in so many of the gaps that I felt like I had in my own high school, middle school, entire sort of K-12 education. And to do it in a way that felt engaging and felt compelling, and that felt different than maybe some other history books that people have read. But I'm just a regular dude. It's just a guy who, after this, I'm gonna like put on my tube socks and go watch. We're rewatching Friday Night Lights right now. So that's my wife and I always have a series that we watch in the evenings. And so what did we just finish? We just finished, we watched Lupin, that new Netflix joint.
Oh, that's funny.
Which I have mixed feelings about. I think the first 5 episodes were better than the last 5. But now the New York Times just put out a thing of like 20 best primetime series, or like, not primetime, the 20 best, like, what's the word? The prestige dramas that have existed since The Sopranos. And so we were like, we're going to watch all of these. And so we're kind of making our way through the ones on that list. It's a long way of, that's Clint Smith.
Take your time.
And we have an audience question from Megan Ford, who's a teacher from Durango High School, Las Vegas, Nevada. And they want to know, how did your work as a poet inform your vision for how the word is passed? Did you find unexpected areas of overlap between the two genres? The relationship between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I have spent the past the book itself as a sort of 4-year project. I've worked on it specifically for 4 years. But over the past several years, I've been like deeply engaged in scholarship on the history of slavery. Annette Gordon-Reed's The Hemingses of Monticello, Dinah Rainey Berry's The Price for Their Pound of Flesh, David Blight, Race and Reunion, Walter Johnson, Soul by Soul, Leslie Harris, Slavery in New York. I mean, the list goes on and on. These scholars whose work has like really transformed my understanding of American history, and thus transformed my understanding of the contemporary landscape of inequality today. And part of what I was interested in was like, what would it look like to put this history in conversation with the physical landscape and the sort of human landscape that it speaks to. And so like, it is one thing to read about a slave cabin, and it's another thing to like stand inside of one and to hear the way the wood moans under your feet when you take a step, to see the way sunlight sort of sneaks in through cracks in the wood planks, and think of how susceptible to the elements people would have been, to like hear a snake like outside of that cabin, and think about how those snakes are descendants of snakes who would have been here when these folks were, just like, I wanted to create like give a sort of human texture and give sensory detail and a sort of sensory experience to that history. What do these places look like? What do they smell like? What's the air taste like? Who are the people who are responsible for telling these stories? What are their backgrounds? What do their voices sound like? What do they remind me of? To make these people sort of 3-dimensional characters in the same way that you would find in a novel. And ultimately that's what I wanted to do, was like create a piece of history that felt like a novel as you experienced it. And that is, I mean, I would not have written a book anything like this without having been a poet. I think poetry, more than anything, it has done many things in my life, but more than anything, it teaches me how to pay attention. And it's taught me how to pay attention. And, you know, what I like that poems push me to like focus intently on a physical object or an idea or a moment, and sort of like give microscopic attention to that moment in ways that I think I hope shine through in the book, in the way that, you know, just like paying attention to the detail, like of like how the trees are moving, of how again, like thinking of what someone's voice sounds like, what is the way the like sun is moving across the sky, what is the, you know, just poet stuff, like just poety stuff, and to put that in conversation with the interviews and the history and to sort of bring it all together, because I exist as a poet, but I'm also, you know, I write for the Atlantic. It's a weird thing now because I'm not, people in all the reviews and stuff, they're like, poet and journalist, Clint Smith. And I'm like, who's a journalist? I'm like, who is that? I'm still getting used to that. I've been at the Atlantic for less than a year. And so I'm like still not used to that. I mean, like I am, and I've accepted that now, not like reluctantly, but it's just weird because I was a poet and I was a graduate student, and then I became a journalist, I guess. But so much of what is in the book is journalistic, right? Because I'm like going up to people and asking them questions, and which runs counter to my ethos, which is like not a natural thing. People are like, wow, you were so brave when you were like talking to those Sons of Confederate veterans. And I was like, I was shaking in my shoes. Yeah, so poetry is my North Star. It is the thing that animates everything that I do write and hope to write. And I hope to continue writing across genres. I would love to write a novel. I would love to write a play. I would love to keep experimenting with different modes of storytelling.
So before we go into, also, shout out Megan. I think Megan's actually here. And if you were curious about like how to ask Clint questions, where we get our audience questions from, if you register ahead of time, we will have your question and you might get it asked. But before we go to our chop it up section, just real quick, I want to ask one more question. This is coming to us from Kimberly Watkins, a teacher at Claremont High School in Claremont, California. What's up, Kimberly? And her question was, your contributions to our society are meaningful and varied. TED Talks, poetry, nonfiction, the Atlantic staff writer, crash course Black American history videos, high school teacher, book discussion facilitator with 3 minds. But her question was, do you have a dream project that has yet to be realized? Is there a novel in you waiting to be written? That was her question.
Or more poetry?
The next poetry book, I've been saying this for a while. It might come out next year. I guess it depends on this book. But the next book is a collection of dad poems. It's and some people have heard them. There were a bunch of teachers who might be here who were at the English teacher conference that we had before the pandemic, Barnes and Noble in Baltimore, and I did a bunch of those poems. And I was writing those poems at the same time I was writing the book, and they were sort of they were like respite from the intensity of the subject matter for the nonfiction book. So that'll be out. It's a very different tenor of work than this one, as some folks may be aware of, because it's like ode to the spit up on my shirt. And so that'll be out next year or sometime relatively soon. We'll see. Dream project. I mean, I would, like I said, I don't know if there's a specific thing. I love fiction. Like, I love fiction so much. And I read novelists and I'm like, that's incredible that you like built a whole world from your imagination and like these characters and these people. And like, it's remarkable to me. And so it is, I've like been messing around with some, like trying to write some stuff, right? You know, but it is, this would be something that happens probably down the line Yeah, I don't know. So I would love to write a novel because I admire novelists so much. I don't know how good it would be, but it would be fun to do. And then I've written about this for The Atlantic, but like I believe that we need a new federal writers project. And so a new project that would collect oral histories from people who had lived through profound and shameful and historic moments in American history. And to the extent that I could be a part of something like that, or could help organize or set up something like that, that would be amazing. I don't know where, you gotta figure out where you find the time. Maybe when my kids are teenagers. But yeah, I would love to do something like that. And who knows? Like, part of the cool thing is like sometimes I don't know until it happens. Like writing this book and publishing this book has been a dream. But like, part of the cool thing about having friends who are like in my same sort of peer group and friend group and cohort is that like we're kind of like are all looking around at each other, and it's like I remember I wasn't really writing nonfiction, and I looked at Hanif. I was like, "Oh, we writing nonfiction now? We writing essays now? Is that
We're writing nonfiction now."
Like Dinesh out here, like, "Oh, we writing plays now? People writing plays? We writing novels?" Eve's out here does 17 things, and it's like, "Oh, we're it's." So I feel lucky to be connected to and have friends with and be friends with people who are like just moving across genre, across discipline, rejecting the confines of like, you're only a poet, or you're only a novelist, or you're only a playwright, and just like, you go where the story tells you it needs to go. So I say all that to say, like, things that I probably have dreams that I don't even know about right now. Because 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said, I had no chance would I have been like, I'm gonna write a narrative history of the slave trade. Like, that was not on my radar. But life presents you with things at various times, and so we'll see.
It's very refreshing to hear. You sound incredibly fearless. Like, you're literally just, you know what, fine, I'll just do this. Let's just do it. Just do it for the fun of it. Just do it because I'm good at it. That's
not even. I mean, it is definitely not because I'm good at it. And I think that's another thing to teach young people too, is that like, I mean, I've been writing poems for like seriously since the summer of 2008. So it's been about 13 years. My poems were bad. Like, my poems were really bad. I was watching some poems that I had, or like I stumbled across some poems I wrote like senior year of college, and then some other poems I wrote even in my mid-20s. And I look back at those and I'm like, oh, like those are not good. And I still write the vast majority of poems or anything that I write today are not good. Like, they are not, like, people, they're like, oh, you published this amazing award-winning book of poetry. There's 50 something poems in that book. I wrote like 500 that didn't end up in the book because they were terrible. But I had to write those terrible poems in order to get to the good poems. And I, hopefully I can write a novel one day, but like, I've, at various points of quarantine, written like paragraph here, just like messing around with some scenes. And a lot of it is just like bad. It's just not, it's not good, but you have to do that to get to the good stuff. It's the same, you practice in the same way that like you do an instrument or a sport, or you don't just show up at the concert and start like playing, the concerto. Like you gotta practice. You don't show up at the game and score a hat trick. You gotta practice, and you do a lot of work that the world will never see, so that the work that the world does see is something that you're proud of. So it might take me writing like 3 bad novels before I write one that's decent. And like, that's how it goes. I wrote 50,000 words, I think, before I got to the first word of how the word is passed would be. Because the first 50,000 words weren't good. But I had to spend a year writing them to get to what the book needed to be.
Thank you. So it is 8:59 right now. Clint, would it be okay if we just asked you 3 chop it up questions really quickly?
Yeah, we can push. I mean, it's up to everybody else. Let's go 5 more minutes. And I'm gonna hit it.
Okay.
I've been giving these elongated answers, but I'm gonna hit you with the rapid fire.
Okay, it's rapid fire time. Everybody, welcome to the Chop It Up. Again, we don't have music yet, but welcome to the Chop It Up section. Rapid fire. First question coming at you. Because we heard you at one point did play soccer. I'm curious. Let's say, writing doesn't work out. You become a professional soccer player. What club, if you could play at any club, what club would you play at?
Well, I mean, that was the dream from age 5 to 17, 18. I was truly convinced that I was going to be a professional soccer player. Like, you could not tell me that I wasn't. I was good. I was like very good, but I was also very good in Louisiana, which is not a hotbed of global soccer talent against which to measure your skills. And so, like, I got to college and was on a soccer scholarship and didn't play. And then I had my 19-year-old existential crisis where I was like, who am I if I'm not good at soccer? And that's when I found writing in poems. And I was like, oh, slam poetry. It's like a competition, but you're writing. So it like fed my competitive appetite, but also like gave me a different sense of identity. It found me, none of what has happened in my life would have happened without the slam poetry scene. When I came to DC, all I wanted to do was be on the DC Poetry Slam team. I came to an iWhips, an individual World Poetry Slam qualifier. I don't know if he remembers this. And I saw Joseph LMS Green on stage. And I was like, who is that beautiful, deep voiced man doing these poems on stage? I was like, I want to do that. And I was like, man, he's so good. And my poems were not good. But I was like, I worked really hard at it. And also like had this, stumbled on this community of folks who like, I didn't know that was a thing, right? I'd seen like Def Poetry Jam but I was not hip to like the community of the slam scene and what that looked like and what that meant. So I don't even know how this is related to the original question. What soccer team do I want to play on? The easy answer would be Arsenal, because that's my favorite team, but all they do is break my heart. So, I don't actually know if I would want to play with them because they've already made me so sad. But this is gonna be this season's a new season. We'll see.
Every season's a new season.
Every season's a new season. I've been saying that for a while now.
Out there. Okay,
so for our next Chop It Up question, I think I'd like to ask, what's the worst haircut you've received in adolescence?
The worst haircut. I wanted to grow like a huge afro so bad. But my hair, I don't know why I did this, but my hair like wouldn't, I had a mini fro like throughout high school and it just like wouldn't grow past like here. And so like, I was like, I'm gonna grow it out. I'm gonna get twists. I'm gonna get dreadlocks. And it just stopped growing. It just wouldn't grow. So, but then when I was in Senegal, when I studied abroad in Senegal, I lived with a family and one of the women I lived with was hair, like she did hair and she was like just very good, like magic fingers. And I was just like, yeah, I've been growing my hair out. I want braids and dreadlocks. And she was like, we can give you braids. And I was like, you can give me braids. And so she like, because she had such nimble fingers, gave me cornrows. But they looked, she did a good job. I looked ridiculous. Like some people have the head for cornrows and some people do not. I absolutely did not have the head for cornrows. I also think that that's the beginning of when I began to lose my hair. Because I swear I was like, my hairline moved up like several inches after that. And so that was the universe being like, don't do that again. No more hair from you.
It was the universe.
It was the
literally
universe
taking your hair away from you.
Taking my hair away. Because I've been bald. I've been bald since I was 20, 21, 22.
Early in the game.
And probably should have been earlier than that, honestly. I was holding on. I was holding on longer than I should have. Like, but I guess I got a good head for being bald, but not a good head for cornrows.
It was great hairstyle choice.
A1.
I see.
One more question. Okay. What period and place in history, if you were completely safe, because I gotta add that for any person that isn't straight, cis, and white, would you go back to? If you could just like observe.
Again, it's like so much of this is animated by having kids, but like we're in a huge dinosaur phase right now. So like I know more about dinosaurs than I ever thought was possible. I had no idea that there were so many different long necks, right? All these theropods, there's the Brontosaurus, the Brachiosaurus, the Apatosaurus, the Argentinosaurus, the Diplodocus. I thought there was one, but there's so many. And I know before quarantine, I probably knew like 5 dinosaurs, like the Stegosaurus, the Triceratops, the T-Rex, the classics. But now I'm out here, I'm like, you're a paleontologist, Clint. Look at you. Like I know so many dinosaurs. So I would love to go with my kids to the Cretaceous period. Because that is when I think the coolest dinosaurs were around. So if we could be in a protective bubble where I wasn't about to be eaten. It is we are all about dinosaurs these days. So I think that would be fun. We went on one of those drive-through dinosaur safaris, and you swear that like my 4-year-old was like, I think he was like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe we're seeing these life-size dinosaurs move. And also like this T-Rex is like a little bit too real. Let's go. Let's go.
Right. It's like, this is amazing. And I also know what this thing does.
Right.
So let's
go. We had a halfway through. He was like, that's enough. We can go.
This is good. Your 4-year-old is the best.
He's
I think is what. Okay.
Good dude.
But it is 9:06 and I see Joseph and Brian on the screen, which must mean they're about to say something, probably.
Yes, we are about to say something. We want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to our 2 amazing hosts for keeping this conversation going. Thank you, Clint, for giving me the compliment that I'm going to splice out of this video and put it at the top of
he's gonna drain it.
It's going to be the top of my Facebook page. It's going to be the top of my website when people go.
We won't stop hearing.
This man gave me a compliment and it made me feel special. No, thank you, Clint, so much for just being here, because I know you have so many other places that you are, and for giving yourself in earnest to us this evening. We really appreciate it. There are a lot of people out there that I know are touched by not just your words, but like your existence and the things that you choose to bring to light and talk about in the public sphere. There was a question about like where do you get the courage from to do this work? And I know we don't have time to keep going, but like that's the type of inspiration you're pulling in people. And I just wanted to say, yeah, you could have easily said no and we would have understood, but you said yes, and I really appreciate it, man. So can we give our guests another round of applause?
Thanks everybody for coming through.
Yeah, thank y'all, teachers, for coming through. Additionally, teachers out there in the world, please tell another teacher about this event and get them here. We have so many more amazing guests coming up in the year. We've almost fully booked out the rest of the year, but we're only going to tell you one at a time because that's what we do. But please let them know that they are welcome here. It is free, and it is a great conversation. Brian Hannon, please tell the people who is coming next to the LMSchat stage.
Sure. One more time, thank you, Clint, for being here. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you taking your time and the extra time for the chop it up questions. That being said, our next guest for July, I believe is July 29th, is going to be Sarah Kay. So yeah, it's exciting. She's a wonderful poet and she's an amazing writer. So I hope you guys can make it out. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Shout out to all my Hayfield people. Thank you, Clint, for, again, one more time for being here. Joseph, anything you want to say before we bid everybody goodbye?
Go to the website, go to buy Clint's book, both books, and then go back to the website and then teach all the poems in your class, and then go back and buy some more books for some more people, and also have these conversations out in the world because they're important and they matter. And I'm talking behind Sarah Kay's face, so let's just scoot that over for a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. Let's keep doing good work. We got a lot of work to do. Appreciate y'all coming. Have a good night.
Great. Night, everyone.